Rahim legacy. British historian Charles Freeman suggests that in scope and extent his achievements Cyrus ranked far above that of the Macedonian king Alexander, who was to demolish the Achaemenid Empire in the 320s but failed to provide any stable alternative. The achievements of Cyrus the Great throughout antiquity are reflected in the way he is remembered today. His own nation, the Iranians, have regarded him as the father, the very little title that had been used during the time of Cyrus himself by the many nations that he conquered, as according to Xenophon, and those who were subject to him. He treated with esteem and regard as if they were his own children, while his subjects themselves respected Cyrus as their father. What other man but Cyrus, after having overturned an empire, ever died with the title of the father from the people whom he had brought under his power? For it is plain fact that this is a name for one that bestows rather than for one that takes away. The Babylonians regarded him as the liberator. The book of Ezra narrates a story of the first return of exile in the first year of Cyrus for this Cyrus is addressed in the Jewish Tanakh as the Lord's Messiah, glorified by Ezra and by Isaiah. Cyrus is the one to whom the Lord, the God of heaven, has given all the kingdoms of the earth. Cyrus was distinguished equally as a statesman and as a soldier, due in part to the political infrastructure he created. The Achaemenid Empire endured long after his death. The rise of Persia under Cyrus' rule had a profound impact on the course of world history. Iranian philosophy, literature, and religion all played dominant role in world even for the next millennium. Despite the Islamic conquest of Persia in the 7th century CE by the Islamic Caliphate, Persia continued to exercise enormous influence in the Middle East during the Islamic Golden Age and was particularly instrumental in the growth and expansion of Islam. Many of the Iranian dynasties following the Achaemenid Empire and their kings saw themselves as the heirs to Cyrus the Great and have claimed to continue the line begun by Cyrus. However, there are different opinions among scholars whether this is also the case for the Sassanid dynasty. Alexander the Great was himself infatuated with the admired Cyrus the Great. From an early age, reading Xenophon's Cyropedia, which describes Cyrus' heroism in battle and governance and his abilities as a king and a legislator. During his visit to Pasargadae, he ordered Aristobulus to decorate the interior of the sepulchral chamber of his tomb. According to Professor Richard Nelson, Friar Cyrus, whose abilities as conqueror and administrator, Friar says, are attested by the longevity and vigor of the achieved Achaemenid Empire, held an almost mythic role among the Persian people, similar to that of Romulus and Remus. in Rome or Moses for the Israelites. With a story that follows in many details the stories of hero and conqueror from elsewhere in the ancient world. Fry writes, he became the epitome of the great qualities expected of a ruler in antiquity, and he assumed heroic features as a conqueror who was tolerant and magnanimous as well as brave and daring. His personality, as seen by the Greeks, influenced them and Alexander the Great, and as the tradition was transmitted by the Romans, may be considered to influence our thinking even now. On another account, Professor Patrick Hunt states, if you are looking at the greatest personage in history who have affected the world, Cyrus the Great is one of the few who observe that epithet, the one who deserves to be called the Great. The empire over which Cyrus ruled was the largest the ancient world had ever seen and may be to this day the largest empire ever. This is a tomb of Cyrus the Great. Religion and philosophy. Tulkarnain is thought to refer to Cyrus by some Quranic commentators, though it is generally believed that Zarathustra's teaching maintained influences on Cyrus' act and policies. So far, no clear evidence has been found to indicate that Cyrus practiced a specific religion. Pierre Bryant wrote that given the poor information we have, it seems quite reckless to try to reconstruct what the religion of Cyrus might have been. His liberal and tolerant views towards other religions have made some scholars consider Cyrus a Zoroastrian king. His views were believed expressed in the content of the calendar. Pray daily before Bel and Nabu for long life for me, and may they speak a gracious word for me and say to Marduk, my lord, may Cyrus the king who worships you and combises his son. Cylinder English translation line 35. Maybe this was not written by Cyrus the Great, maybe some of his descendants have made this cylinder, or maybe someone other has written these. The policies of Cyrus with respect to treatment of minority religions are well documented in Babylonian texts as well as Jewish sources and the historians' accounts. Cyrus had a general policy of religious tolerance throughout his vast empire. Whether this was a new policy or the continuation of policies followed by the Babylonians and Syrians. As Lester Grabe maintains, is disputed. He brought peace to the Babylonians and is said to have kept his army away from the temples and restored the statues of the Babylonian gods to their sanctuaries. His treatment of the Jews during their exile in Babylon after Nebuchadnezzar II destroyed Jerusalem is reported in the Bible. The Jewish Bible's Ketuvim ends in 2nd Chronicles with the decree of Cyrus, which returned the exile to the promised land from Babylon, along with the commission to rebuild the temple. The Seth Cyrus, king of Persia, all the kingdoms of the earth hath the Lord, the God of heaven, given me, and he hath charged me to build him a house in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Whosoever there is among you of all his people, the Lord, his God, be with him. Let him go there. Chronicles 36:23. This edict is also fully reproduced in the book of Ezra in the first year of King Cyrus. Cyrus the king issued a decree concerning the house of God at Jerusalem. Let the temple, that place where sacrifices are offered, be rebuilt, and let its foundation be retained, its height being 60 cubits and its width 60 cubits, with 3 layers of huge stones and 1 layer of timbers, and let the cost be paid from the royal treasury. Also, let the gold and silver utensils of the house of God, which Nebuchadnezzar took from the temple in Jerusalem and brought to Babylon, be returned and brought to their places in the temple in Jerusalem, and you shall put them in the house of God. Ezra 6 3 to 5. As a result, Cyrus policies the Jews honored him as a dignified and righteous king. He is the only Gentile to be designated as Messiah, a divinity, appointed leader in the Tanakh, Isaiah 45 1 to 6. Isaiah 45:13. I will raise up Cyrus in my righteousness. I will make all his ways straight. He will rebuild my city and set my exiles free, but not for a price or reward, says Yahweh Almighty. Yahweh is in Arabic Yahayyo, mean living God. As the text suggests, Cyrus did ultimately release the nation of Israel from its exile without compensation or tribute. Traditionally, the entire book of Isaiah is believed to predate the rule of Cyrus by about 120 years. Josephus, the first century Jewish historian, related the traditional view of the Jews regarding the prediction of Cyrus in Isaiah in his Antiquities of the Jews, book 2, chapter 1. In the first year of the reign of Cyrus, which was the 17th from the day that our people were removed out of their own land into Babylon, God commiserated the captivity and calamity of these poor people, according as he had foretold to them by Jeremiah the prophet before the destruction of the city, that after they had served Nebuchadnezzar and his posterity, and after they had undergone that servitude 70 years, he would restore them again to the land of their fathers, and they should build their temple and enjoy their ancient prosperity. And these things God did offer them, for he stirred up the mind of Cyrus and made him write this throughout all Asia. Thus said Cyrus the king, since God Almighty hath appointed me to be king of the habitable earth, I believe that he is that God which the nation of the Israelites worship. For indeed he foretold my name by the prophets, and that I should build him a house at Jerusalem in the country of Judea. This was known to Cyrus by his reading the book which Isaiah left behind him of his prophecies. For this prophet said that God had spoken thus to him in a secret vision. My will is that Cyrus, whom I have appointed to be king over many and great nations, send back my people to their own land and build my temple. This was foretold by Isaiah 140 years before the temple was demolished. Accordingly, when Cyrus read this and admired the divine power and earnest desire and ambition seized upon him to fulfill that was no so written. So he called for the most eminent Jews that were in Babylon and said to them that he gave them leave to go back to their own country and to rebuild their city, Jerusalem, and the temple of God, for that he would be their assistant, and that he would write to the rulers and governors that were in the neighborhood of their country of Judea, that they should contribute to them gold and silver for the building of the temple, and beside that, beasts for their sacrifice. Cyrus was praised in the Tanakh, Isaiah 45, 1 to 6, and Ezra 1, 1 to 11 for the freeing of slaves, humanitarian equality, and costly reparations he made. However, there was Jewish criticism of him after he was lied by the Kuchites who wanted to halt the building of the second temple. They accused the Jews of conspiring to rebel. So Cyrus in turn stopped the construction, which would not be completed until 515 BC. During the reign of Darius I, according to the Bible, it was King Artaxerxes who was convinced to stop the construction of the temple in Jerusalem. Ezra 4 7 to 24. Some contemporary Muslim scholars have suggested that the Quranic figure of Dhul-Qarnain is Cyrus the Great, and it is true because the question in the Holy Quran was taken from the Jews' books, that is from Torah, and the question was asked via the Arab idolaters by Jews. This theory was proposed by Sunni scholar Abul Kalam Azad and endorsed by Shia scholar Alama Tabatabai in his Tafsir al-Mizan and Makkaram Shirazi. Cyrus restoring the temple, reconstructing the temple and restoring the Cyrus building the temple at Jerusalem. This is another view. Cyrus building the temple in Jerusalem. Cyrus the Great liberated the Jews from the Babylonian captivity to resettle and rebuild Jerusalem, earning him an honor place in the Judea. Painting of Daniel and Cyrus before the idol bell. Cyrus releasing the Jews.